Hi everybody. As Patrick said, I'm JR, Jean-Roch Maître, and I'm here today with Joris to talk to you about the Monster UI and talk to you about how to build your own Monster UI app. So, to introduce myself, I'm the lead front-end engineer at 2600Hz. I've been working here for the past 4 years, and it's been a blast. I've been working on the Kazoo UI at the beginning, and working on Monster UI for the past 2 years. It's been a long time, and we're very happy to release it today. Joris has joined us 2 years ago and has been working with Max and I on the Monster UI, and he will be assisting me today and show you the demo. So, for those of you who don't know what is Monster, let me talk to you about what it is. So that's the UI that we've been talking about for a long time. We actually showed glimpses of it last year at the KazooCon. And today we actually opened up the repo, so if you go on GitHub, you can actually fetch the Monster UI code. And it will include most of the core apps that we've built, and will include more apps in the future. So the main goal of the Monster UI, when we started coding it, was that it would be more focused on the users. When we started developing the Wingstart application, it really was a demo, like Darren said, and we built it like very quickly. The goal was to show all the APIs that we had and all the great capabilities the backend had, because nobody wanted to build one. But after a few months, we realized that a lot of customers were actually enjoying it, and so we added more features to it. It really became messy, and we really wanted to build something better so that developers could build applications on top of our UI and help us show different APIs. So when we built it, we wanted it to be responsive so that it works on desktops, on laptops, and also on tablets like iPad, so that you could show to your customers an application working like when you go on a visit, for example. And then we also wanted to work and make the internationalization work so that it's built inside the framework. We added the internationalization part to Kazoo UI in the last year, thanks to the SIP Labs guys who contributed it last year. Good job, it was awesome. We really liked it. Yay! And so we also coded it in Monster UI, and we did it so that it's integrated from scratch. So there are a little bit less hacks than what it is in Kazoo UI, and we believe it's easier to work with it. So we hope that a lot of you guys will contribute more languages to the Monster UI. And finally, as I said, we wanted it to be developer friendly. Our main goal is not to show all the features ourselves. We want you guys to code application using the with Kazoo, and all the backend call that we need is inside the JavaScript. We have built a lot of helpers to help you do that in Monster. So today, what are we going to do? Well, we wanted to showcase something that would be very easy to code and that would basically highlight the simple things that you can do with Monster. So we're going to show you some cool things with WebSockets, because we added some events to our backend to track live events happening. So whenever a call is received or whenever a call is picked up inside our backend, we can now show something in our UI. So that's what we want to do. We're going to just plug a cell phone, call our voicemail, and we will be able to see those events happening on our UI. So, in order to do that, few requirements. This morning you received a paper telling you what to do for that demo. So you have some credentials that should allow you to go to your local Monster UI. You should be able to log into it. And if you want to follow it, you can use the credentials that are written on that small website. And then you will need to be able to edit the code. So whether it is with Vim, with Sublime Text, you do whatever you want, but if you want to do it yourself, you will need to edit some code. Joris is here so that he will do it for you if you want to follow it with us. So, first of all, let's launch the Monster. So you can see here, we have a login page. And so using the credentials that we got this morning, we're going to input them and then log into the UI. And so here it is. We logged into the UI. It's loading. And then we have a white screen. So let me describe what you see. You see the top bar, which is the base of our Monster UI framework. On the top left, you can see an apps section, which is the way you want to switch between the different apps. You will also have access to the App Store from that button. So if you click here, you can enable and disable different applications at the bottom by clicking App Store. So what we already did here is that we added the demo app as our default application. It should be the same for you. But if it's not, you can go inside the App Store. And here, there is an application named Demo App. You click on it, you turn it on, and once it's turned on, you can close the window, go back to your app switcher, and make sure it's your default app so that when you reload the application, that application will be loaded for you. But so here, as we can see, we don't have anything loading, and that's because we don't have any code for that demo application. So let's try and do that. So first of all, we need to initialize that first folder. And so to do that, what we use inside Monster is that we have a skeleton folder. That skeleton folder, we use it internally whenever we are going to create an application. So what we're going to do is go inside that apps folder, copy the skeleton folder and move it and rename it demo. But first, let me talk a little bit about what's inside the Monster UI repo. So more importantly, there is the apps folder. The apps folder is where all the logic goes, all the different applications. If you were to build your own demo, your own application, it would be contained in its own folder. Besides that, we have other folders like CSS, Docs, JS. Those are all the global elements used by the framework that you don't really need to worry about as a developer. If you wanted to add an external plugin like a different JavaScript library, you would need to add it inside the JS folder. And then you have the index.html. As I said, what we do is a single page application, so basically what the UI does is that it manipulates the DOM inside the index.html. So there is only one page that is loaded, and that's when you first load the UI. Okay, so let's go and copy that skeleton folder. So go inside your apps folder, copy the skeleton, and move it so that it's named demo. And basically the name is important because it needs to match whatever is defined in the apps. And so we already configured the app to be named demo. So whenever we load the UI, it's going to load that demo folder. So now that you have the demo folder, let's see what's inside. So there are very few things. First, the I18N, which is a short for internationalization, contains all the different strings for your application. So if you want your application to be in English and French, you will need two different files like this, which contain all the different strings. Then you have the views folder, which contains all the HTML and all your different templates that you're going to use in your application. Again, that name inside the views is important because that defines how we're going to call it inside our JavaScript later. So if it's named layout, our helper is going to just call it in JavaScript by invoking that layout name. Then finally we have the CSS, which contains all the styling for your application. Here in the skeleton it should be empty because we don't have any styling. We're just using some skeleton from Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is a library that comes with a lot of responsive design already included, and that's what we use. And then all the magic relies in the app.js file. So I'll go over it quickly. Oh, it's here. So an application itself is very quick. I mean, it's very short. It's basically 50 lines of code. It's split in like two big parts. First of all, we need to define it and define the different requirements for that application. So in other language, you would include other libraries. Here, that's basically what we do. We call require, and we say that we're going to use jQuery, underscore, and the monster framework. If it's not already loaded, those libraries will be loaded, and then and only then your app will be loaded. This is already a big improvement from Wingstart because Wingstart didn't really have a load manager, which meant that a lot of times we actually had some pieces of JavaScript that were not loading properly because we did a bad job at coding it at first. This, using require.js, allows us to do a lot more things like this. Once the external libraries are loaded, you're going to define an app variable in JavaScript. And that is where all the logic is included. It contains a few fields that are important. First, the name. That's going to be used by the framework, so you need to name it demo. Then I18N, so that's the array to set your internationalization. So here, we're saying that the application is available in American and French. Then request, which here is an empty JSON object. If we wanted to use an API that is external to Kazoo, but that is not defined in the SDK I'm going to talk a little bit about later, then we would define it here if we wanted to handle it within our monster.request helper. The subscribe object is an object that allows you to create events for other applications to use. For example, if you wanted to build two applications, you could interact with the code of both of your applications by creating events here. This is a bit advanced and we won't go over it right now. Then load and init app are two functions used inside the framework. 99.9% of the time you are never going to change them, so I'm not going to go over it. And then the only function remaining is the render function, which is the function that's invoked by the framework when everything is loaded. So that's the entry point and what really matters. As we can see here, what we do for our demo application that we just created is that we call monster.template, which is a helper that's going to load your HTML inside the JavaScript object, and then we put that JavaScript inside, that jQuery object inside the parent container, and we append it to the DOM. So now, if we coded this properly and save the file, if we refresh our Monster UI browser, we should be able to see the application, the skeleton app loading. Okay, so it's loaded. That's not what we want to do. So, in order to continue, there is a website, a helper that we coded that's on our Monster UI repo. So, if you want to follow along, you need to go on the Monster UI repo on GitHub. And so Joyce is going to do it. Take some time. And so you should see the Monster UI repo. Let's see here. And so we just opened it 2 hours ago, actually. So if you want to fetch your own copy and play with it and create some pull requests, we would be very happy to help you with that. But anyway, we have a docs folder here. And so we created a KazooCon.md file, which is basically a markdown file with a bunch of snippets of code that you will be able to copy and paste to play with that demo. And so we tried to keep it simple. So first of all, let's try to change the HTML. Because right now in the HTML we just have a title, we have a description, we want to do more. So here we have a bit of code that we're going to copy and paste inside the layout.html that we have shown earlier. So go ahead and copy that piece of code. And now we need to go inside our views folder in the layout.html file and replace what we had before by the new template. And so what that template contains is basically just a new layout. We kept it simple. We use some Bootstrap helper like the span to and etc. And then we have a welcome text, and then we have a HTML table, which basically just defines what we want to show. So here we want to show the event type, the color name, the callee name, and then the time the time when we called, basically. And so that's just the HTML. So in order to display that, we need to change one more thing. We need to grab the i18n strings because we're using some here. And so you can go back to the GitHub page and take the second snippet of code. So here, grab that and copy it and paste it over the en-us.json file that's in your demo repo. Okay, so you can copy this, remove it, and paste over the things you just got. And here, basically, we just define the text that we're using inside our HTML template. So as we can see, like in the events, we have channel_create, channel_answer, which are defined in the backend, but we don't want to display those not ugly, but like not user-friendly names to the user, so we're just replacing them. Okay, so now, if you go back to Monster and refresh that page, you should be able to see your new HTML. Make sure that you're not caching anything, so if you go in incognito or just do a hard refresh, that should do it. And there we go. So now we have a new basic template that's displayed. It's using Bootstrap, and so that's why we have some formatting still. But now we actually want to do something with it. So in order to do that, we need to add some JavaScript. So you can go back at the GitHub page, and we're going to go over WebSockets. So before I go over it, let's copy that bit of code and paste it just after the render function inside our app.js function. So copy it, and go back to your app.js file and paste it after the render. So you add a comma and you paste it inside our JSON object, basically. And so what this function does, we're going to invoke it in the render function so that it's actually triggered. So go back to your render function. And here there's a line that's commented. So in order to uncomment it, you remove the two first slashes. So now, when we add the template, we're going to call that JavaScript function with the template as an argument, and we're going to add some behavior. So what are we doing here? Well, there's three parts. First, we want to define what we're going to do whenever we receive an event from the backend. So that's the add event function. And I'm going to talk about it after. So then we have the way to subscribe to those WebSocket events. And so to do that, we have a monster.socket that's basically a socket that's opened whenever an application needs WebSockets. And so then we authenticate ourselves to the backend by giving them our account ID and auth token that are both stored within the application magically. And then with the binding attribute, we say what event we want to listen to. So the backend has like a couple of events available. What we're using are call events, so pick up, answer, placing a call. So those are the three here. And then we also have a bunch of events for conferencing, like whenever someone joins in, whenever someone is muted. And then we also have some Faxbox events that have been created by Louis. Anyway, we subscribe to those events, so now we're going to receive an alert if we subscribe to those events. And that's what we did. So now let's add some behavior. And by using monster.socket.on. Basically this binds an event and associates a JavaScript callback whenever that event is triggered. And so here, when we receive those events, we're going to call the same function over and over again and just send it the data that comes from FreeSwitch. So what's inside the function data is basically the raw data coming from FreeSwitch. And so we give it to our add event function. Next time, we can format it, because we don't want to do that over and over again. And again, we built a bunch of helpers like this, and we're looking for like other helpers that you guys could build. So if you have ideas, we are looking for pull requests to make that better. We already have one, for example, to format phone numbers, so that anytime you could send like a non-formatted phone number, and that would show it based on like the country you want. Okay, so now that you have that event.html, we just need to add the format events JavaScript, and we should be able to demo our application. So let's get that format event function. Let's copy it and paste it just after the bind events that we did. And so, very quickly, what is it doing? Well, it just takes the data and formats it. For example, the to field coming from FreeSwitch, if I call Joris at 2222, the to field from FreeSwitch is going to be something like 222 adds an IP address that's flowroute.com or something. What I want to display is just the 222. So I just strip the first part, whatever is before that @ sign, and I will display it so that the HTML just has to display it and don't do any logic. And that's basically what it does. It changes the event so that it takes a friendly event name, and then we just return that formatted data. Alright, so we should have everything. So if you go in your browser and refresh the page, you should be able to see the table, but you won't see any data because we are not placing any calls or anything. So let's try and do that. So we have a soft phone that's registered to our account. So we're going to bring it up, and we're just going to try to call our feature code. So we have *97, for example, is set up, and so if we try to call it, it should, there you go. So it picks up the voicemail as soon as we took it, so it's displaying it in green. If you hang up, it's going to add a red line, and there you go. So that's basically the gist of the demo. You can track call events very easily in like less than 100 lines of code, which is pretty cool. And you could, you could build a lot of cool applications on top of that. And that's what we really hope you guys are going to do. So I'm almost done, but I want to talk a little bit about something we built that is also pretty cool. Is the JavaScript SDK that we are using inside Monster, but that you could use in your own UI if you wanted to not use Monster. So we're going to go over it very quickly and see how we integrated it inside Monster. But again, you don't need Monster to use that SDK. So we have a folder here that you probably don't have, but I just want to show you, for example, how would we call, if we wanted to show the list of devices of an account. The only bit of JavaScript you need is here. You could like wrap it inside a function called list devices, and then you would call self.callAPI inside Monster, and that's the only thing. It's built in inside all your application. You would call self.callAPI. You give it a resource name. Those resource names are defined inside the SDK that we're going to show in a few seconds. And then you just give it the parameters, be it the account ID most of the time, and then some other data like user ID if you wanted to get a specific user ID, and then some data if you wanted to upload the data. And then a success callback. That's basically what is your application going to do with that. So if we go look at the source of the jQuery Kazoo SDK, it's just a bunch of JavaScript with all the list of the API that we're supporting, and there is a lot. I mean, we basically support all the APIs, and that's something that you can basically get with in our repo. If you wanted to use it, it's very easy to use. So, for example, here we can see the user group. If you want to get a user, you just have to call self.callAPI, give it the resource name user.get, and then just an account ID, a user ID, and that would return you the information. And that's it. So before finishing, what's the future for us and Monster UI? Well, we want to do some more cool things with the App Store. Right now the App Store is cool, but we can't sell application with it, and what we want to do is to allow developers to sell their applications through our App Store. And so at the beginning of next year, you should be able to basically upload your own application and sell them through an app store, which would be really cool. Now that we're done with the core apps, as we call them, which are account management, numbers management, basic PBX features, we want to focus on things that you guys are interested in and that most of our customers are, which is a really cool call flow manager. As Darren mentioned this morning, despite the fact that it's pretty ugly, it's very functional. The call flow manager we have in Kazoo UI, we need to port it in Monster UI because a lot of people are asking for it. And then also a new user portal that needs to be a lot more user-friendly than what we have in Kazoo UI. It will be available on your tablet, and so it should be really cool to see for like the list of messages, the list of calls you receive, that kind of stuff. And that's it. More importantly, what we really want is the feedbacks of the developers. If you work in JavaScript and you have any questions, please come talk to either Max, Joris, and I at the Ask an Engineer booth. We will be very happy to talk about Monster with you guys. And that's it. Thank you very much.